CNN, they chose the wrong Maine resident to push this gun control, okay? They found a resident, CNN, and then they tried to push the gun control crap on him, and then they found out the hard way that, we picked the wrong guy. We picked the wrong Maine resident to mess with. Good morning, folks. This is the Morning Buzz. I've got so much to get to today. I want to talk about this senator who's actually demanding that this building be is shut down, completely shut down. It's Nancy Pelosi's federal building. It's a federal building that taxpayers pay for. And there's a senator out there demanding, hey, let's shut this building down because it's ravaged with crime. And why should the taxpayers be paying for this? If it's ravaged with crime, it's pretty much already abandoned. The building's abandoned. And it's Nancy Pelosi's building. So we're going to get to that here coming up in just a little bit. Plus, Jason and Brittany Aldean, they absolutely crushed this Halloween video. I think it's hilarious. It's an Anchorman video. And they make this video where they're Ron Burgundy and Veronica Corningstone. And they're sitting there and they're kind of mocking the fake news media. So they posted this video out on Instagram, and I just think it's hilarious. Look, folks, the Maine communities were very anxious. They're finally feeling relief after this man accused of killing 18 people has been found dead. They found him dead. CNN was, of course, on the ground looking for residents to scare, and they were calling for gun control. Okay, so the media, this is just what they do every single time there's a mass shooting. They'll get their boots down on the ground. They'll get them, their little journalismers, their corporate journalismers down on the ground, and they're going to try to get the guy to say, well, we just need to ban guns. We just need to get, we need to get the guns off the street, these weapons of war off of the street. So they look for that guy. That's what CNN was tasked with. These corporate journalismers are always tasked with that. But they chose the wrong guy to peddle this agenda. And he's perfect for the American people. And I'm so excited to talk about that. But joining me first, William J. Kelly. William J. Kelly. He's an Emmy Award-winning producer. He's just so fantastic. We always visit with him on Monday morning. William J. Kelly, how are you this morning?
Happy to be with you, Kat. God bless you. Thank you.
Yeah, God bless. And I mean, it is just, it's a Halloween weekend, and it was a blast. I got to see a lot of people out at a couple of events. I was at the Lincoln Reagan dinner here. We are going to be getting to that, folks, because I talked with Darren LaHood a little bit, so I thought it was interesting what he had to say about the Israeli-Hamas attacks, being that he serves on national intelligence committees and things like that. But we're going to get to that. And William, speaking of mass shootings, there was one on Chicago's West Side, and that actually left 15 people wounded. Right. I'd love to talk about that. Tell me more about this mass shooting and why this isn't getting attention. And, 50
right.
people wounded.
Exactly. Yes, and that was in addition to the 35 other people that just randomly were shot in the city of Chicago. I believe 5 fatalities. Usually, these numbers go up as the day goes on, and people realize that people were dropped off at emergency rooms or what have you. But the mayor of the city of Chicago, Brandon Johnson, finally released a statement in which he, of course, blamed guns. But he doesn't blame this, the out of control violent crime that is taking place in the city of Chicago. He either doesn't seem to understand the difference between legal gun ownership and violent criminals who obviously don't have FOID cards, much less concealed carry or anything resembling that. So he's either disingenuous or he just genuinely isn't competent, and in that case shouldn't be mayor of the city of Chicago, from what I'm hearing from his own security detail. That's there are so many layers of hypocrisy here, Kat, not the least of which is that Mayor Johnson has 130 sworn police officers on his security detail. That's more than Mayor Lightfoot had.
Wow. And I mean, this just goes to show you not even just the hypocrisy, but that they sit there and they say that guns kill people. It's people
Right.
who kill people. Okay. And they are sitting there saying, oh, if we were to get these weapons of war off the street and blah, 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 then we would see a decrease in crime. Here's
Right.
the thing, statistical evidence. I mean, for example, that recent mass shooting in Maine. Okay. If just half of those 18 people who died were packing heat, then the likelihood, and you crunch the numbers on this,
Right.
maybe 3 people would have died, maybe three
Right.
people, but that's very rare too. I don't even know if you would have just had half of those people packing heat, that probably wouldn't have happened. That many
Amen.
people wouldn't have died.
And what is even more concerning in the city of Chicago is the combination of Pritzker and Johnson flooding our city with Venezuelan migrants.
Mm.
There are many reports now that I'm getting. You won't hear it on the local news, but I'll share it with your listeners that Venezuelan prisons and jails are being cleared out, and a very violent Venezuelan gang called TDA, which is known for human trafficking, murder, arms trafficking, kidnapping. They are in Chicago. They are being recruited by local gangs. I don't think these local gangs have any idea what they're dealing with, and they're and if the mayor thinks that disarming law-abiding Chicagoans, in combination with flooding the streets with this violent Venezuelan street gang, is going to make Chicago crime better, or then he's completely wrong. We already have enough domestic street violence, street crime. We have out of control armed robberies now in the city of Chicago that just go every night. It's 10 people were robbed on this corner, 15 people on that corner, and these are people who are not being identified, not being arrested, certainly not being convicted, even if they are arrested. So the idea of somehow taking guns away from law-abiding citizens when they are literally at risk of domestic and now Venezuelan violence every time they step out of their house is really there's no sense to it, unless the idea is to put law-abiding citizens at greater risk.
Mm.
Who knows?
Yeah. Well, and I want to get your reaction to this. The Illinois legislators, and you and I've talked about this, William J. Kelly.
Yes.
Where are our legislators? Where are the people who are supposed to be helping us out? It turns out that some Illinois legislators are concerned about the growing taxpayer costs. We've talked about it, $9,000 per migrant in rental assistance. That's absolutely absurd. They filed legislation now in hopes of putting an end to the state's migrant sanctuary status. So Chicago and other regions of Illinois have seen nearly 20,000 non-citizens arrive from the southern border in the past 13 months, and we face financial issues in caring for them. So now what we've got a Republican from Macomb. She says this week one of her goals here in the fall veto session is to introduce a measure aimed at limiting this influx of immigrants. And this measure is called House Bill 4187. And what that would do would be to repeal the Illinois Trust Act and end our sanctuary status. So I don't know. I feel like if we just end our sanctuary status, that's not really going to do a whole lot. I don't think that's going to stop Governor Greg Abbott from shipping migrants here. If we end our sanctuary status, what do you think?
I think it would stop it overnight. The reason the reason why Abbott is sending these busloads, and really plane loads too, by the way, that are also going unreported, is simply because of the fact that Illinois is a sanctuary state. You get what you pay for, I guess, is the bottom line. One contract alone for a group called Favorite Staffing was just renewed in the city of Chicago for $40 million. Okay, that's one company that specifically is staffing the the Inn of Chicago right down the street where they have it's the largest migrant shelter in the city of Chicago. It's right off of Michigan Avenue. It's a former luxury hotel. I don't think any of these migrants are going to be thrilled with the idea of going and living in a tent after they've been living in a Michigan Avenue Magnificent Mile hotel since they've arrived here. But here's something to worry about. Okay, one did these staffers, they bill Chicago. They just submit bills that apparently are paid. One bill for 1 week was for $580,000, over $500,000. Now, I've been to that building. I've tried to report from there. I even tried to enter it once, if you recall. And I can tell you, I have no idea what these staffers are doing that could possibly be costing the taxpayers $500,000 a week. Okay, I mean they basically, I mean, the garbage is piling up. I don't know what they're doing, what these staffers are doing that would somehow justify submitting bills like that to the taxpayers, Kat.
Yeah, well, and submitting bills to the taxpayers, the taxpayers are not only paying those bills, but we're paying for people to, what are they called? These peacemakers as well. So, I mean, they're getting paid, what is it, $200 a pop? These ex-cons to go out there and play cutesy time and to play guidance counselor with this yellow vest on. And we're paying for all of these different programs to rehabilitate ex-cons. But these peacemakers are going out there, and because they're ex-convicts, they're going out there, and instead of playing counselor, they're going out there punching people in the face, dragging people out of their cars at stoplights. And so not only is this a burden on the taxpayer going towards this humanitarian, whatever you want to call it, aid, or this rental assistance or whatever bill they've got going on, but it's also going to proactively cause the problems that we're seeing unfold.
We have a new problem in the city of Chicago called crash and grabs. Okay, where a gang of teenagers, in some cases, 14, 15, 16 years old, will steal a car, and then they will crash it into a storefront and then run into the storefront, grab whatever they can in some random, haphazard manner, and then jump into a waiting stolen car and speed away. Well, there was one boutique, I guess you could call it, that was literally a victim of a crash and grab 3 mornings in a row. Okay, remind me again, what are we paying taxes for? You would think that that there would be some kind of police presence that after maybe the second morning in a row that this boutique was crashed and grabbed, or whatever they call it. So I mean, it is out of control. We're starting to see vigilantism in the city of Chicago, in the absence of any actual law and order. You see people who, there's a story that I'm investigating today, and I'll try to have more details on this, the next time we speak, but where some people, relatives of someone who was the victim of an armed robbery, tracked down the robbers and then engaged in a gun battle with the robbers. I think they were shot. A couple of people got shot. So, when you have a breakdown of law and order like this, when you have the mayor, running around with 130 sworn police officers and saying that he's going to disarm the rest of the law-abiding citizens, while simultaneously flooding the city of Chicago with Venezuelan street gangs, you've got a recipe for disaster, Kat.
Yeah, well, and before we go, one more quick thing I wanted to talk about was the 55-year-old man. His name is Juvenile Coronel. Now, he was arrested 5 times in this kind of no cash bail era.
Right.
So I recently, we sat down with McLean County Sheriff Matt Lane, so that's our county sheriff here, and this guy, this 55-year-old guy out of Chicago, he's been keying up cars, slapping women, punching car windows, jumping on top of car hoods. All of these incidents led to the same outcome, of course, him being released, so that way he could continue to reoffend.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a no cash bail era. Now, one thing I wanted to ask you about, William J. Kelly, a lot of people, they'll come up to me and they'll say, well, the no cash bail thing, it's kind of just a Chicago thing. McLean County is kind of weathering the storm. We haven't really seen this purge happen here in McLean County. Now, I am going to be doing some deep diving, some digging, and figuring out who all has been released here in McLean County on no cash bail.
Right.
And I want to get those names and the records of those people because I think that's the proof in the pudding, right? I don't have those names and that those details quite yet. But what would you say to somebody in McLean County who says, no cash bail? It really doesn't affect us here in McLean County because we don't have like these crazy criminals in Chicago like Juvenile Cornell, who was, seen slapping women, punching car windows, like with his bare fist, and jumping on
Right.
top of cars, like complete purge law type stuff or complete the purge type stuff. Right. What would you say to somebody here in McLean County who says, "Yeah, it doesn't really happen here"?
Well, first of all, it reminds me of a famous saying from history. It couldn't happen here, right? And then, of course, it does. So there's another great saying that if you don't punish the guilty, you actually punish the innocent. And when you let people off, they commit these crimes. There is no punishment. You're going to see two things happen. You're going to see people who are these repeat offenders thinking that they are above the law and that they can go out and attack anyone, anywhere. We are seeing, just so you know, Chicago criminals going out into the Chicagoland suburbs and committing the exact same types of crimes that they've been getting away with in Chicago. So we do see Chicago criminals who are not being punished, not being incarcerated, just taking their show on the road. So it can happen. It can happen where you are. Okay, trust me when I tell you this. But the other thing that, and I can't emphasize this enough, that we're seeing is vigilantism now. People who are just taking the attitude that there is no justice. The only way I'm going to get any justice is if I take the law into my own hands. And I know some people seem to think that that's something that is good, that should be encouraged. I'm telling you, we're going to see a lot of innocent people shot, stabbed, run over, attacked. But if we can't somehow reinstitute actual policies that result in law and order, Kat.
William J. Kelly, thanks so much for joining me here on the Morning Buzz, veteran Chicago reporter, feared and despised by Mayor Lori Lightfoot and Brendan Johnson, Emmy Award-winning producer. Now, William J. Kelly, tell me a little bit about your legal defense fund, where we can find your coordinates. Where are you at?
Well, thank you, Kat. God bless you for doing that. ReporterWilliamJKelly.com if you want to see some of my viral videos, confrontation videos with incompetent and or corrupt politicians. But the problem is that sadly in the city of Chicago, and I believe this is also spreading statewide and nationally now, if you're a reporter and you ask real questions, you can count on your life or liberty also being at risk. I never would have thought that as a reporter I would need a legal defense fund, but yeah, if anyone likes what we do here and they're willing to support my legal defense fund, go to ReporterWilliamJKelly.com. Any contribution is welcome. It's tax deductible, so it's like making a contribution to a church or a charity. But yeah, I mean, going to City Hall, going to a rally. You have politicians now, a Chicago alderwoman who her own residents were trying to ask her questions about a migrant shelter in her ward, and she turns around and accuses them of attacking her. And Mayor Johnson actually issues a statement defending her. It's not journalism is not a
So
crime.
does Governor J.B. Pritzker.
Yes.
JB, he came out and I read that statement and I'm thinking to myself, man, this poor woman, she probably went through hell. It sounds
Right.
like she did. And then you find out that she actually went to the rally.
She
and
crashed their rally. Exactly.
crashed their rally and she was just yelled at. She wasn't touched. She wasn't harmed in any kind of way. And it was actually really
Journalism is not a crime, Kat. And asking corrupt politicians questions is also not a crime. But trust me when I tell you this, leading up to 2024, you are going to see more and more corrupt, incompetent politicians, specifically in the city of Chicago, but statewide, guaranteed, leading up to 2024 in the Democrat National Convention, trying to criminalize, trying to make it a crime for people like you and I, and even just regular citizens, to ask them questions. Wait and see.
William J. Kelly, thanks so much. You have a great rest of your Monday morning at
Yes.
6:26, folks, and you have a great one, Will.
You too, Kat. God bless you.
All right, folks, we're going to be back on the other side. We've got a few things I want to chat about, specifically CNN, these corporate journalismers, they chose the wrong guy. They chose the wrong Maine resident to ask questions, and they tried to get this guy to peddle their narrative, but it didn't work. It didn't work. We're back next. Good morning, folks. Thanks so much for tuning in. I so do appreciate it. Go ahead, smash the like button. And we're going to be back talking a little bit about corporate journalismers and how they were asking this Maine resident. He's the guy that, was traumatized by this mass shooting, these 18 people dead. And they tried to peddle this narrative that guns kill people. People kill people, okay? Guns don't kill people. People kill people. And they tried to peddle this narrative that we need to get these weapons of war off the street. If you're watching, go ahead, smash that like button, smash it right now. This Maine resident said, I'm not playing with that. And like I said, statistically, if at least half of those 18 people who died were packing heat, maybe 3 of them would have died, maybe 3. The loss of life could have been prevented had those people been packing heat. And like I said, I do want to talk about, the oddness here where I'm kind of shocked that this even happened. It's like the timing is kind of odd because there's a Supreme Court of the United States. They're supposed to be hearing this case about a federal ban right now. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that here on the Morning Buzz. Go ahead, smash that like button, and we're going to be back in just a couple of minutes. Hey, good morning. This is the Morning Buzz. Thanks so much for tuning in. I so do appreciate it. It was amazing seeing you at the Lincoln Reagan dinner. I went there on Friday, and Ty Smith and we got to interview Lisa Holder White, and she's an Illinois Supreme Court justice. That interview was so explosive, and we had such a great time. It was a pleasure meeting some of you and talking with some of you. I did get a chance to talk with Darren LaHood. We are going to be talking about Cori Bush here coming up in just a little bit, and oh man, this woman. I mean, she's a squad member, okay, and people are putting her on blast because she's accusing Israel of, quote, ethnic cleansing. And she takes a very out of context clip from Benjamin Netanyahu, who's the prime minister there, and she, quote, tweets it. She references it, and she accuses the Israel people of ethnic cleansing, which, sorry, Cori, but I think the opposite is true, where Hamas and the Palestinians, because folks, the Palestinians are not innocent people. Okay, the Palestinians are Hamas. The Palestinians are Hamas, and there is no innocent Palestinian. There's no country called Palestine. Okay, that's fake news. That's false. And the media thinks you're too dumb to put it together that they're the same. Okay, the Palestinians, the country Palestine, that doesn't exist. There's Palestinian territories. Now, that's not to say that there's non-Israels who are innocent over in that region. I think that there's innocent Arabs and Muslims who don't believe in the complete eradication of Israel. However, I don't think that's it's not a big population. Okay. A lot of these Arabs and Muslims over in that region would like to see the eradication of Jews. They'll chant. I mean, even on these college campuses, you're hearing these protesters. They're saying from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Really, what that means is from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, they want to see Israel completely eradicated, which I've gone through multiple times with you, that there have been several land offers in exchange for peace with the Hamas people, with the Palestinians. Palestinian is the word invader. Okay, that's actually a Hebrew word the Jewish people gave to these radical terrorists, and they called them invaders because they've been invading their land, and they've chipped away at the land Israel was supposed to have. I mean, Saudi Arabia, there's Syria, like all of that should be Israel's. That's promised to the Israelis by God, actually, in the Bible. It lays out where those barriers should be, where the border should be. And the border should actually be way, way into Saudi Arabia, Syria, Iraq, all of it. It really was promised to the Israelis. Now, because the Israelis have been kind, they've offered land in exchange for peace. But unfortunately, the Israelis have never gotten the peace that they've asked for. Anyway, so I bring up Cori Bush. She's accusing really Israel of ethnic cleansing, and she's being blasted for this tweet that she's got out there. And I talked with Darren LaHood, and he had something very interesting to say, because I asked Darren, I was like, can't Israel just turn Gaza into glass? I don't really think that they need humanitarian aid. Now, he says that yes, they could turn Gaza into glass, but they're going to leave their northern border unprotected. That's why that they need Americans to help them there at the northern border. Now, I don't think that we need to escalate this any further. I think that providing support to Israel financially is not where we should be at right now. We definitely need to bring those aircraft carriers home. I would hate to see, I don't know how many people, I'm thinking 20,000. That might be where we're at right now, 20,000 people over there, boots on the ground. I think there's about 12,000, or maybe it's 12,500. I'd have to look at how many aircraft carriers we've sent over there. But I'm worried that a missile is going to come in and blow up one of those aircraft carriers. And I can see it now. I can see the headlines, Americans dead. But Joe Biden demands a response. And then, boom, we're in it. I think we're already in World War III. And then that might be World War IV. Who knows? But we're going to get to Cori here coming up in just a little bit. It was great seeing you guys, like I said, at the Lincoln Reagan dinner. We are going to be talking about CNN because I think it's important for you guys to see how corporate journalismers think. So that way to keep yourself away from that narrative that they're peddling and that they're pushing. So these poor little communities around Maine, these anxious Maine communities, could you imagine the anxiety that you'd have knowing that there's a man out there who just killed 18 people and he's out on the loose? They're finally feeling relief today because the guy accused of killing those 18 people has been found dead. So they're feeling some relief today, but CNN was on the ground looking for residents to scare and looking for residents who were scared enough to call for gun control. But they chose the wrong guy for their agenda, and he's perfect for Americans, the guy that they sat down and interviewed. So last week in Maine, a man went on a shooting rampage. I covered it here on the Morning Buzz, and he killed like 18 people, and he injured like dozens more. It started at a Walmart distribution center where Corey, this is the guy we're going to be talking about who CNN interviewed, his daughter worked there at this Walmart distribution center. So thankfully she's okay. Thank God she's okay. But understandably, the family is a bit rattled. Okay, so Corey, his daughter, they are all a little bit rattled due to this manhunt that was underway. At this point, they had not found the person. CNN was on the ground looking for people to scare and for scared people to push this gun control narrative. We now know that the guy was found dead. CNN wanted to know how scary it was to see all these long guns being used, being carried around by cops who were searching the neighborhood for the guy that killed those 18 people. And Corey was stopped by a reporter. And let's take a listen to the exchange here. As always, I'm live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Rumble. Be sure to subscribe to my YouTube. That's Cat Peterson 929. Let's take a listen to CNN on the ground that day while they were looking for the guy.
I wanted to show you this area here. I'm over here because this is where we're told that the car was found. The person of interest, his car, this is where the car was found. And it's really close to where we were earlier, where police were doing that searching and where they've been searching. We just saw police driving by at a rapid rate. And then there's also a helicopter now in the air as they are. Certainly, it seems as now that there is daylight, that there is, and the search is becoming more intense. And I think as this day goes on, that's only going to increase because they really don't have any idea where he is now. But this is where he dropped his car, and then where he is now is a mystery. And that's why there's so much concern around this area. Take a listen to my conversation with one of the residents here as he talked about his concerns.
It's just nerves are rattled right now. Keeping an eye on the woods, because I know those woods down there, they go run right back here. And I got my daughter inside.
Your daughter, how old is your daughter?
She's 10 years old. And my oldest daughter, she works at the Walmart DC too. And I had to message her to find out if she's okay. And it's very unnerving right now.
Seeing those officers with those long guns walking through.
Here we
that
go.
Actually made me feel better. Seeing the cops coming around here, that makes me feel a million times better. In the situation like this, I wish I had a firearm.
And that's exactly why police are out here searching. They want to address the concerns that the residents here have. What's making this so difficult is this area, just the way it is. It's a heavily.
So there you have it, folks. He literally came out and said, Corey did. He goes, I wish I had a firearm. I would feel better if I had a firearm. Yeah, well, statistically speaking, look, folks, if half of those 18 victims had been packing heat, the odds of them killing this guy, killing more than, 3 to 4 people would have been zero. 3 to 4 people would not have even died, probably. I mean, that if at least half of them. Now think about if all of these 18 victims had been packing heat, this wouldn't have happened. It's one thing to wait until the dust settles too, and that's what really bothers me about this whole clip with CNN and the corporate journalismers on the ground there. It's one thing to have the dust settle and try to scare people into gun control after the dust settles. But that's not what journalismers do. No. There's a brief waiting period, very, very brief waiting period between hearing a gun go off and confirming the shooter's identity. Uh, and if that identity doesn't get in the way of the media narrative before the gun control demands start. Okay, so there's a very brief period of time. They have to make sure that the shooter's identity doesn't get in the way of their media narrative. And as soon as they confirm the shooter identity and it doesn't get in the way of their media narrative, then they start peddling the gun control demands. And the worst time, I think, to do this, the peddling of this narrative of the gun control and demanding for gun control, I think the worst time to do it is when a town is literally on lockdown and a gunman is on the loose, right? I mean, the last thing on normal people's minds is more laws and regulation for the government to not enforce. I think that's the very last thing on people's minds. One thing many of these shooters have in common is the words, "he fell through the cracks," was known by the feds, is also another common one. And it's hard for many in the media to understand, but when there's a tragic mass murder, the last thing people are concerned about is making things harder for residents to protect themselves. Okay. That's the last thing on my mind when I hear stories about this. I think, man, I got to get a gun. I got to be able to protect myself. That's the first thing on my mind. I think the last thing on our mind is, making it harder for ourselves to protect ourselves. Why do you think so many Jews have been at the gun ranges this month? Yes, that number is up. Jewish people are going to the gun ranges this month. It's incredible. Look, and like I said, just half of those 18 victims, if they had been packing heat, no more than, I think the odds of him killing more than 3 to 4 people would have been 0. This may not make any sense to the lefties, but if everyone was issued a firearm at the age of 18, and I believe that we should start doing this, issue people a government issued firearm, and make it taxpayer, right? Because taxpayer money goes towards abortions, towards people in other states. Here in the state of Illinois, if you're a resident, you're paying for, most likely an Indiana resident, to have an abortion. You know what I think people on the right need to start doing? What Republicans need to start doing? They need to start demanding that taxpayer money be used for guns. We give 18-year-olds state-issued government guns, and we give them the proper training in their senior year of high school. And I think gun violence would dramatically decrease. I think we'd see a much safer society. A gun is a tool. And if more good people had the right tools and the proper training, I don't think the bad guys would exist anymore. And I think it's interesting timing, this whole story anyway. Rahimi versus the United States. In just about a week, we're going to hear the constitutional impacts of this case. It's a Second Amendment rights case. And the justices, they're supposed to be hearing the arguments on November 7th. This is United States versus Rahimi. And what it does, it looks at the constitutionality of a federal ban that's out there right now. It's the possession of guns by individuals who are subject to domestic violence restraining orders. So they're not convicted of any kind of violence or abuse or anything like that, but they have a restraining order against them. So the question comes to the court in the case of Zaki Rahimi. He's a Texas man, and he has a restraining order against him in 2019. Apparently, he had an argument with a girlfriend, and he knocked her to the ground, dragged her to the back of the car. A year later, the police found guns and ammunition in his house, and he was charged with violating a federal ban. So this is going to be a huge case. There's going to be constitutional impacts to it, and I think it's interesting just how close this mass shooting was to this case. So I'm going to be back talking a little bit about Nancy Pelosi in the 7 o'clock hour, Cori Bush. You guys can see me live in the studio. That's YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Rumble. I'll be back next. Good morning, folks. Thanks so much for tuning in. I so do appreciate it. We're going to be coming back talking a little bit about Cori Bush. And I do want to talk about Nancy Pelosi because this building of hers needs to be shut down. And I'm calling for the shutting down of this. So is a senator. I'm going to be back here next. Today is National Candy Corn Day. Love it? Hate it? There's a lot of candy corn around this time of year. In fact, the candy corn company, they roll out about like 30 million pounds of candy corn each year. Okay, so how do you eat candy corn? I want to know. So some may say they don't eat it at all, but surveys from the National Confectioners Association found that a majority of Americans, about 65% of us, prefer to pop an entire kernel of candy corn into our mouths. And about 28% say that they just eat the white tip of the kernel first and then pop the rest of it into their mouth. And 7% say that they actually bite the wide yellow part first at the end. So there's like white, orange, and yellow. I think it is the colors of it. I haven't had candy corn in so long, but there's a lot of Americans out there who say they eat candy corn and they have a specific way of eating candy corn. They either eat the white tip of it first, or they eat the wide part of it first, or they just pop the entire thing into their mouth. 65% of Americans say they just pop the entire candy corn into their mouth. I would say that I am. I think I'm a pop the whole thing into my mouth and just eat it. And it's kind of tiny to kind of like mess around with like eating half of it. So, did you know that candy corn was actually called chicken feed at one point? Yes, the candy was invented by this guy. His name is George Renninger. That's I think it was his name, and it was invented by him. And it was called the Wonderly Candy Company in Philadelphia. So it was invented by this guy. And when it first came out, he called it chicken feed. In the boxes at the time, there was like a little rooster logo on it, and it said the slogan on the box, it was something worth crowing for. So it was actually called chicken feed at one point, but now we've kind of changed the name and we call it candy corn. So yeah, candy corn. Do you love it? Do you hate it? I'm not much of a fan. I'm not much of a fan. I don't eat that much, but uh, according to this candy company that rolls out this candy corn each year, each fall they sell about 30 million pounds of it here in America. So that's a lot of candy, folks. 30 million pounds of candy corn each fall. Ugh. All right, I do have to take a break, but did you guys hear about Matthew Perry? He died. Um, he was a very well-known actor, widely recognized for his role in the hit sitcom Friends. You know who Matthew Perry is. Now, he was found dead after an apparent drowning in a hot tub, but I think he died of a heart attack. It came out later that he had cardiac arrest. This was a really strange Instagram post that he had posted a few days earlier. I'm just gonna say that, and it was pictured. It was a picture of him chilling in the hot tub, and then he kind of had a caption that was odd on Instagram. But we're gonna talk about it here next on the Morning Buzz. This is Cities 92.9. Hey, folks. Yes. So, as you can probably hear, my voice is a little scratchy this morning. I have been sick for the past couple of days, so I'm like trying to push through and really get through this show. I'm not that I don't want to do it, but man, I mean, my voice is like scratchy. It's pretty scratchy. So, I did not go to the Halloween party at the VFW on Saturday. I was so disappointed, but I was like, "No, I'm too miserable. There's no way that I'm gonna be able to hug up on people and love on people." So, yes, as you can hear in my voice, I am a little bit sick. So yes, that's why I didn't go to the VFW party. But Kev Ferris was there, so we're back in just a bit. Woo! Hey, Halloween is tomorrow. If you guys want to know some trick-or-treating spots, then you can go to cities929.com. We've got our trick-or-treating hours posted there from 5 to 8 in Bloomington on October 31st. That's their trick-or-treating hours. And then we've got Danvers. They've got 5:30 to 8 p.m. on October 31st. Colfax, it's 5 to 8 on October 31st. That's tomorrow. So happy Halloween, Hallows Eve. We're going to have a special tomorrow lined up for you on the Morning Buzz. 7 o'clock hour coming up next on Cities 92.9. So yes, did not go to the Halloween party, but I did go to the Lincoln Reagan dinner on Friday night. Just was too sick to make it out that Saturday, but I eat candy corn with peanuts. Only way I eat it. Oh, that's kind of interesting. Candy corn maybe with like popcorn and things like that. I really like popcorn with the M&Ms sprinkled in there, and you kind of shake up the popcorn, and you got salty and sweet. They were gifted land in exchange for peace. Instead of peace, they exchanged missiles and war. Yes, so we're going to be talking about that because Cori Bush is out there. She's being blasted by people because she sat there and she accused the Israelis of ethnic cleansing, which is just wrong. She's just wrong. Okay, that's not true. And she used Benjamin Netanyahu's clip here where he talks about something in the Bible. She took it out of context. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that. And Nancy Pelosi, her building, folks, you have to stay tuned for this because there's a federal building, and I didn't know this, but Joni Ernst, she is a Republican out of Iowa, and she's calling for this building to be shut down. So this building is actually in San Francisco, and it's abandoned, and it's actually a big threat to public safety. And I've got to tell you a little bit about this because Nancy Pelosi has been representing San Francisco for 35 years. And in 2007, she was elected Speaker of the House, and she held that role until fairly recently. I mean, she is a powerhouse. Okay, she's arguably probably one of the most powerful people in the United States. And here she is. She's got taxpayers paying for this federal building with her name on it. So we're going to talk about that and the building itself, why it's a threat to public safety and why it needs to be shut down. And this Iowa woman makes a really great case to have this building shut down because there's so many overdoses that happen out of it. The building, the HHS workers, they can't work in it because it's that unsafe. Okay, so this is supposed to be a building where you've got workers, government workers going in and conducting the people's business, but they can't even do that because of how many overdoses take place in that same block as the building over the past 6 months. I've got 150 overdoses right here. So, plus there's been reports of these HHS employees, Department of Health and Human Services. These employees are being chased with knives by homeless people and hammers, people with hammers, and they're chasing these people. So now we've got an Iowa Republican saying, hey, let's shut down this federal building. And I think the federal building is actually named after Nancy Pelosi, which is even like incredibly funny. It's called the Nancy Pelosi Federal Building. And it's been abandoned due to these far leftists. Them incentivizing these policies, these lefty policies. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. If you're watching, go ahead, smash the like button. Have you guys seen this video? It's of Brittany Aldean and Jason Aldean. It's hilarious. Okay, so very rarely do I pull things like celebrity news or anything like that, but Jason Aldean and Brittany Aldean, they know all too well what it's like to be attacked by the media, the fake news. And they talk about fake news in their recent Instagram post. They dressed up as the people from Anchorman. That's Ron Burgundy and Veronica Corningstone for Halloween, and they posted a parody on Instagram. And I think it was really funny. They poked fun at mainstream media and the fake news because they're constantly going after the Aldeans because they don't hold the same values that Hollywood actors do or should. They go against the grain. Okay, Brittany Aldean and Jason Aldean. Jason Aldean, he came out with that song, Try That in a Small Town. Brittany Aldean, she's constantly attacked on Instagram for things that she posts. But we're going to talk a little bit about that. Matthew Perry, like I said, he died. Now people are like, Kat, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. How did he die? Maybe it was the drugs. Was there something going on? Well, right now we don't think that there was any kind of nefarious activity going on as far as drugs or an overdose or anything like that. There were no drugs on the scene. However, I mean, the guy, he had lots of substance abuse history. Okay, so him dying, I think it was 54. He's dead now. Matthew Perry. It's not too shocking, right? If you have your run-ins with substance abuse, cocaine, right, all of these different drugs, I'm sure that's going to catch up to you sooner than later. Um, Now, one thing is interesting. He had a heart attack. Now, I do know that he was a big purveyor of the COVID-19 vaccine. Not to say anything, folks. I'm just saying that it's kind of odd how, he had this Instagram post out there. It was a very odd Instagram post. I will say that. I'm like, whoa, that's weird that he posted that. I don't know if there's been whispers of suicide. There's whispers of, was it the vaccine? Was it a drug related incident? I don't know. All I know is that Matthew Perry is dead. There is an investigation going on into his death. Right now, the cops say that there was no foul play in his death. It just looks like he had a heart attack in this hot tub, and that's what caused him to die, drown and die. Now, there's been conflicting reports. Did he drown? Did he have a heart attack? We don't know. I think he had the heart attack and then he was in his hot tub and drowned subsequently after having the heart attack in the hot tub. But who knows? But Matthew Perry, dead. That's some news coming out this morning. Also, this driverless taxi, I want to get to this. They could lose their license because this driverless taxi actually hit a pedestrian and dragged this pedestrian down the street. I think it's an interesting story. We're going to hit that because driverless cars, are they going to be a thing? I don't think so. As soon as there's more driverless cars on the street than there are cars being driven by actual people, that's when I'm going to stop driving. Driverless taxi. Is it losing its license after hitting a pedestrian and dragging this pedestrian all the way down the street? Cars don't hit people. People with cars hit people, unless it's a driverless car, of course. I've actually got more of this. It's odd. The ironic thing about this autonomous technology, this is, a car that drives itself, is that now the blame falls on the object. We cannot take cars away from sober people because someone else drives drunk. Okay, we know that if there's drunk drivers, we're not taking away cars from people who are sober. Okay, we take away cars from people who drink and drive. But we can take autonomous vehicles away from all because the responsibility now falls on the inanimate object, since it can move itself. However, liberals think guns are autonomous, and that's not true. Guns don't just grow legs and start. I mean, they're not self-firing guns. Like they're not autonomous. But that's besides the point. We're going to get to the story here coming up in just a little bit. There was a driverless taxi, and there was this unfortunate incident where it allegedly struck a pedestrian in San Francisco earlier this month, and the car actually drugged the person about, like, I think it was like 20 feet or something like that. So we're going to get to that story coming up here in just a little bit. But cars don't hit people. People with cars hit people unless it's a driverless car. And of course, this driverless car, the responsibility falls on the inanimate object in this case. Which is not the case for guns because guns don't shoot themselves, okay, or they don't sprout legs, and they're not like self-shooting guns, okay? Takes a person to shoot the gun. Before we get to that story, I do want to talk about the Nancy Pelosi federal building because this is interesting. Go ahead, smash the like button if you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Rumble. 309-451-9299. That's our text line. Yes, I did not see you guys out at the Halloween party. As you guys can probably hear in my voice a little bit, I'm feeling under the weather, a little sick. It's this weather. It's this cold weather. It got down to like 29 degrees last night. It's freezing. Ugh, winter. But I think we're going to get like a warm up this weekend. I think I saw like 64 degrees on Saturday. So I'm looking forward to that. This Nancy Pelosi building, she's represented San Francisco for 35 years. I think it's important to say that. In 2007, she was elected Speaker of the House, and she held that role until fairly recently. So she's a very powerful woman, this Nancy Pelosi is. I don't think I need to tell you that. For the past 3 decades, she's represented San Francisco. And what has become of it? Well, under her watch, San Francisco has succumbed to these progressives. The progressive ruins is what I call it. Okay, San Francisco, it's just these ruins. And this woman, Joni Ernst, she's a Republican out of Iowa. She's a senator, and she wants the former Speaker Nancy Pelosi federal building in San Francisco to be shut down. So there's actual federal building with Nancy Pelosi's name on it. And she wants this building shut down, this Republican, this senator. She's calling for the shutting down of this building because of the violent crimes and overdoses that have been occurring. And it's like within, walking distance of this building. And she says it's a threat to public safety, this building. So Nancy Pelosi Federal Building. That's what it's called. The Nancy Pelosi Federal Building. Just look it up. It's been abandoned due to far left policies incentivizing crime. Taxpayers shouldn't have to keep the lights on in Nancy Pelosi's haunted house. Really, this is Nancy Pelosi's haunted house. And it's been abandoned. In early August, the Department of Health and Human Services warned workers to steer clear of the building for the foreseeable future after rampant drug dealing had been taking place outside of the facility. So this is a federal building. Taxpayers pay for it. Only progressives can take the wealthiest city in the country and turn it into this cesspool of, we're looking at conditions that those in third world countries are not even forced to endure. Okay. San Francisco is terrible. And most third world countries are actually better than what you'd see in San Francisco. Okay. And I don't think that Nancy Pelosi representing this area for more than 35 years, I don't think it's a coincidence that it's like this. So according to this Iowa Republican, Ernst is her name, the area has become an open-air drug market with addicts shooting up, snorting, and smoking drugs in plain view. So she said in a comment to dailymail.com, Ernst did, that working at an HHS building shouldn't be a risk to your health or life. Yeah, considering that you're working for Health and Human Services for the government, I don't think that, you showing up for work every day should be like a risk. Okay. But that's the uncomfortable reality because former Speaker Pelosi and other liberal politicians have allowed criminal chaos to overtake the streets of Chicago. According to its designer, the building was set up to represent the way the government should be and how the workplace should be. Ironically, the Nancy Pelosi Federal Building is instead a symbol of the way government doesn't work. Okay, it's clear that the government doesn't work when you look at the federal building, the Nancy Pelosi's federal building, with offices and workplaces largely empty due to the drug and crime problems resulting from these misguided policies of the state and city governments. Okay, so here we are. The Daily Mail, they've got the numbers here. 150 overdoses in the same block as this building within the first 6 months of 2023. 150 overdoses. That's 150 people dead in just 6 months. Oh, but let's talk about the mass shooting. 18 people died, which is all tragic. Death is tragic. But nobody's talking about these overdoses just in this little block right here by the Nancy Pelosi Federal Building. Additionally, there have been reports of employees being chased around by homeless people who are holding hammers and knives. So these poor HHS employees, they can't even get into the job because they're going to be stabbed or they're going to be beat to death with a hammer because of the hammer holding homeless. A protective fence was actually installed so that way the homeless doesn't get to the HHS workers walking into work. But so the senator goes on, the GOP senator, the Republican senator, Ernst is her name. She's from Iowa. She says, it's not safe for federal employees to work here. It certainly can't be safer. If it's not safe for federal employees to work here in San Francisco, then certainly it's not safe for a business owner to operate their business here and for families to live here. I'm calling for a shutdown of Speaker Nancy Pelosi's federal building. After all, they've been forced to abandon it. So why should the taxpayers keep paying for it to keep the lights on in Nancy Pelosi's haunted house? So it's the haunted house. It's spooky season, folks. And that is Nancy Pelosi's federal building. The most expensive place to live in America is the worst place to live in America. And this all happened under Nancy Pelosi's watch. Make no mistake, it's Nancy Pelosi's fault. She's been there for 35 years. While Pelosi has arguably held the position as the most, probably the third most, if not the most powerful person in the country, maybe even the world, she's turned a blind eye to the carnage of her district and the voters she represents. Okay, so she's the most powerful person. She's got this speaker role. Okay, and she's probably one of the most important people in the world, most powerful person in the world. Despite all of that power, she doesn't use any of it for good, for the good of her district, for the good of her constituents, the good of the voters she's supposed to represent. She's the worst. Jason Aldean, Brittany Aldean, I love them. They're really cool. So they have actually, they know all too well what it's like to be attacked by the media. Okay, so Jason Aldean, he has that song. It's called Try That in a Small Town. The fake news, they came out. They said it was like a modern day lynching song. You and I both know that's not true. Try That in a Small Town is a fantastic song. Now, this is kind of hilarious. They dressed up as anchormen. So they dressed up as Ron Burgundy. Jason Aldean did. And Brittany Aldean dressed up as Veronica Corningstone. So they dressed up as this crew on Anchorman, the movie, if you've seen it, and they posted it on for Halloween. It's a parody, and really what they do, they go after the mainstream news. They call them fake news, and they kind of like make fun of the mainstream news and like kind of indicate that it's like it's the mainstream news is the fake news, and that it's similar to that of like Ron Burgundy and Anchorman. So I'm gonna play a little bit of it here for you. It's really funny. I would recommend you go watch it on Instagram. I'm not gonna play all of it, but here we go.
Ron Burgundy and Veronica Corningstone. It's go time in Nash Vegas. This is Channel 4 News with 5-time Emmy Award-winning anchor Ron Burgundy and co-anchor Veronica Corningstone. It's Channel 4 News at 6 o'clock.
Good evening, Nash Vegas, and welcome to Channel 4 News. I'm Ron Burgundy.
And I'm Veronica Corningstone.
And we are here to bring you the news as always, because we are 80% of the time unbiased, 100% of the time. Our first story tonight out of Nash Vegas comes from Luke Bryan, who was recently caught driving all the country girls crazy by eating out of a jar of peanut butter.
So then they've got, an image of Luke Bryan eating a jar of peanut butter with a spoon, like a plastic spoon. I think it was really funny. And they go on and they talk about, the fake news going after them. And one of my favorite quotes out of that video, and go watch the whole video. I think it's pretty funny, but Brittany Aldean, she had the money quote, as I would say. So, quote, she says in that video, apparently, according to Brittany's recent tweet, she hates all animals. It's based on the tweet that says, I love dogs. It sounds like a PR nightmare. Like she's got a PR nightmare on her hands. So it's just kind of a snarky reference to Brittany Aldean making a joke on Instagram. Fellow country star Maren Morris. Maren Morris is a complete lib. Refusing to calm down about it. It was a joke, and Jason's longtime PR team dropping him as a result of that. So there was some beef between Brittany Aldean and a fellow country star called Maren. Her name is Maren Morris, and I mean, she refused to calm down about the joke, and this led to the PR team dropping Jason Aldean, proving once and for all that the Aldeans do not give a hoot. They released this this little number. It was pretty funny. I think they trolled them pretty good. 80% of the time, we're unbiased 100% of the time. So well done by all those involved here. So we're gonna take a quick break. When I come back, we're gonna talk about the driverless taxi. Apparently they're losing their license because the driverless taxi in San Francisco actually hit a pedestrian and drugged them all the way down the street. But I've got more on that story coming up in just a little bit. We've also got to talk about Matthew Perry. What went on? How did he die? He posted this very haunting Instagram post a few days earlier before his death. He's pictured in his hot tub relaxing. We're going to go over that here on the Morning Buzz, Cities 92.9. always be a part of the show. 309-451-9299. No current politician should have any building named after them unless it's going to be removed or torn down later, like the racist monuments. Okay, so yes, we're talking about the federal building named after Nancy Pelosi, and it turns out right there on that block, on that stretch of that building, 150 overdoses in just the 6 months. In the first 6 months in 2023. This is ridiculous. The employees, the Health and Human Services employees, they go into the building and they're chased with hammers and knives walking into work. This is 35 years under Nancy Pelosi's reign. She doesn't give a darn about her constituency, and she's the most powerful person. She's a speaker. She's been there for arguably, I think she's one of the most powerful people in the world. And she doesn't use that power for good. She uses it for evil, and she allows and sets it up. She sets San Francisco up for failure. Real quick, I do want to talk about candy corn. I eat candy corn with peanuts the only way I eat it. Yes, so candy corn, like I was telling you guys earlier, this is like this is a big thing. I can't believe that because like I haven't eaten candy corn, I don't think since I've been like 5 years old or something like that. But 30 million pounds of candy corn we go through, and that's how much has been shipped out this year for Americans. So that's a lot of candy corn, folks. Also, did you know candy corn used to be called chicken feed? The candy was invented by George Renninger, and it was a Wonderly Candy Company in Philadelphia. So this was his candy company in Philadelphia, and he first came out with it when he invented it. He called it chicken feed, and on the boxes of the candy corn, there was actually like a little rooster logo, and the slogan was "Something worth growing for." So today is National Candy Corn Day. Love it, hate it, eat it with peanuts, whatever it is. 30 million pounds of the candy corn is sold each fall. They roll out about 30 million pounds of candy corn each fall, this candy corn company. So haunted refrigerator night. So this is a time to purge your fridge of all of the scary stuff hiding inside of it, the biohazards, as I like to call it. So that's what today is. It's haunted refrigerator night. So today is a good day to kind of go through your refrigerator, clean it out, purge the fridge of some of the scary stuff, the fuzzy stuff that might be inside of it. But as I said, we do have trick-or-treating hours posted on cities929.com. In normal, the trick-or-treating hours are 5 to 8 p.m. on October 31st. That's tomorrow. Also, shout out to Lexington. Their hours were yesterday, citywide from 5 to 7 p.m. That's October 29th now. They also had this really cool thing. It was at 4 o'clock yesterday on October 29th. It was like the City Hall special treat. So City Hall giving out candy to kids. It was kind of cute. So Hudson, they've also got trick-or-treating hours out there. It's 5 to 8 p.m. on Halloween, so that's tomorrow. Before we took the break, I was telling you guys a little bit about Cori Bush, and we're going to get there because Cori Bush, she's out there. She's a squad member, right? And she's stepping it up a notch because she is accusing Israel now of executing an ethnic cleansing campaign, which we know is not true. The squad has put on a disgraceful display starting the very day that these Hamas terrorists committed unspeakable acts against Israel. They're murdering I think we're over 1,400 civilians right now. The violence against Israel is unreal, and they've been murdering civilians. Now, the rhetoric has been so bad that it's even angered some of their fellow Democrats, okay? But the squad is stepping it up a notch now with Cori Bush coming out and calling what Israel is doing, defending itself, ethnic cleansing. So I'm going to go through her tweet here on the other side. And we're going to talk a little bit about Benjamin Netanyahu. He came out with this video, and he comes from, he pointed out a quote. It's in Deuteronomy 25, verse 17. Where God commands the Israelites to remember what Amalek did to them. So this is a passage where it talks about how the Israelites left Egypt And this was an exodus from bondage under Pharaoh. We remember the story, right? So he talks about that passage, and he talks about how the weak and tired people, how they were in the back of this procession this was an exodus from bondage, out from underneath Pharaoh. They were leaving, and they were actually attacked from the back of the procession. It was an Israelite procession where the weak and the feeble, they trailed behind. They were at the back of the procession, and what these Amalekites, that's what we'll call them, Amalekites, what these Amalekites at the time did, they picked off the weak and the feeble in the back because it was the easiest. They were defenseless targets. And he made a comparison, Benjamin Netanyahu, to this period in time. So this is a passage, and he's referring to Deuteronomy 25, verse 17. And he makes a comparison to what's going on with Hamas right now. Now, this parallel between the cowardly attack of the Amalek and the recent barbarianism of Hamas against innocents in southern Israel is actually really fitting. It's a genius parallel that Benjamin Netanyahu actually draws here. And Cori Bush, she uses this Netanyahu quote, and she misquotes it, and of course she uses it out of context. And then she tries to use Benjamin Netanyahu describing Deuteronomy 25, verse 17, as a way to say that the Israelis are calling for like the ethnic cleansing of Arabs, Muslims, and the like. So we're going to be back here on the Morning Buzz at Cities 92.9. You can always text me at 309-451-9299. Plus, a driverless car struck a pedestrian. I've got that story next. Woohoo! Hey, coming up in just a little bit, we're going to be talking about this driverless cruise taxi. Yes. So it was a driverless taxi, and they lost their license after hitting a pedestrian and dragging this pedestrian down the street, actually. And this is an odd one. So California has put the brakes on this driverless cruise taxis. That's what they're called. They're cruise taxis, following this very unfortunate incident where allegedly it struck and dragged a pedestrian in San Francisco earlier this month. The DMV has suspended its permits for testing driverless vehicles effective immediately. So the DMV said, no, we are not going to be testing these driverless vehicles anymore. Police are waiting to press charges as they determine the car's automotive. Ooh. Police are waiting to press charges as they determine the car's automotive. Get it? The motive of the car. It was driverless. This really makes you think. Did the programmers plan ahead for things like, hitting a deer? Did they plan ahead for things like, oh, if we hit something, do we put if it like has an impact, if the car feels an impact, do we have the car stop automatically? Because this car struck something and it just continued going, like driving. So we're going to get into how it exactly hit the pedestrian because I think it's kind of interesting. And look, folks, point of the story here is, I'm not too excited about the whole driverless car thing. All that I've really got to say is the day that we only have self-driving cars on the road is the day I will officially stop driving. I mean, the driverless cars, I don't like that idea at all. Self-driving cars, that's kind of scary. And this story is actually a good reason why I'm afraid of these driverless cars. So we're going to be talking about it here coming up in just a bit. But first, I want to get to Cori Bush. She's stepping it up a notch, folks, because she is accusing Israel now of executing what is called an ethnic cleansing campaign. Yes, you heard me correctly. She's saying Israel is conducting and executing an ethnic cleansing campaign. Now, the rhetoric has been really bad from the squad, so bad that other Democrats have been angered by the squad, and other Democrats have called them out for their rhetoric. But the squad has been, put on a very disgraceful display, starting from the very day Hamas terrorists committed unspeakable acts of violence against the Israel people, murdering over 1,400 civilians. Okay, so here she has it. She has the tweet out there. Cori Bush, we can't be silent about Israel's ethnic cleansing campaign. Babies dead, pregnant women dead, elderly dead, generations of families dead. Millions of people in Gaza with nowhere to go but being slaughtered. Nowhere to go being slaughtered. The U.S. must stop funding these atrocities against Palestinians. Like I said, folks, for several months, or not months now, ever since this happened, October 7th, several weeks now, I've been telling you that there's no such thing as Palestinian people. That doesn't exist. Now, there are people who are innocent. They're non-Israelis, and they're like Muslims, Arabs, who don't believe in this radical idea that the eradication of Jews is going to somehow give them perks by Allah, that Allah will give them a better life or more blessings in the afterlife if they were to eradicate Jews. Okay, that's a belief that a lot of people, a lot of these Palestinians and Hamas terrorists have. So-called Palestinians. There is no country called Palestine. Palestinians, the word Palestinian is a Hebrew word. It means invader. There is no such thing as a Palestinian. It's not a countryman. There's no country called Palestine. This is a vile accusation made by Cori Bush. Okay, she's calling these Israelis ethnic cleansers, which is not what's happening. In fact, the opposite is happening. Hamas is going after Israel people and going after Jews. So Hamas, what they did on October 7th is actually called ethnic cleansing because Israel, they are specifically going after Hamas and Palestinian targets, people who are not innocent. They are not going after innocent people. They're not doing that, look, folks, it's war. It's all awful. And if the Israelis If there's casualties in war, then that's war, right? The tweet that Bush quotes here is actually really misleading. So she says this in her Twitter in her tweet. She says babies dead, pregnant women dead, elderly dead, generations of families dead, blah blah blah. And the U.S. must stop funding these atrocities. So with this tweet, she actually quotes Benjamin Netanyahu. And here's what he had to say. Now, it is dubbed, folks. It's not because he's obviously speaking Hebrew. So there's a translation over the top of what he's saying. So let's take a listen. Here we go.
You must remember what Amalek has done to you, says our Holy Bible. And we do remember, and we are fighting. Our brave troops and combatants who are now in Gaza or around Gaza and in all other regions in Israel are joining this chain of Jewish heroes, a chain that has started 3,000 years ago from Joshua ben Nun until the heroes of 1948, the Six-Day War, the 73 October War, and all other wars in this country. Our hero troops, they have one supreme main goal: to completely defeat the murderous enemy and to guarantee our existence in this country. We've always said, never again, never again is now.
So there we have it. That's the translation there of Benjamin Netanyahu, and what he's essentially saying there is Deuteronomy chapter 25, verse 17. Read it if you've got time today, maybe on your lunch break. But basically, God commands the Israelites to remember what Amalek did to them. Now, the passage goes on to say that the Amalek attacked the Israelites as they left Egypt. So there's this mass exodus from bondage under Pharaoh. We remember the story, okay? So read Deuteronomy if you have time today. But basically, the Israelites were leaving Egypt because they were under bondage when it came to Pharaoh, okay? And the people who were really tired, really weak, the elderly, they were put into the back of this procession out of Egypt. Okay, so they were put into the back. The weak, the feeble, they trailed behind, obviously, because they were weak and feeble and they weren't able to keep up with the others so much. So they were in the back of this Israelite procession. And the Amalekites, what they did, they went to the back of the procession and they targeted these defenseless targets. They were the easiest, most defenseless targets, and they attacked them. So what Benjamin Netanyahu is doing here, he's comparing and he's drawing a parallel between this cowardly attack by the Amalekites, okay, back in biblical times when they were leaving Egypt, this mass exodus. He's comparing and he's drawing a parallel. And this was a cowardly attack by the Amalekites. And then he's comparing that to the recent barbarianism that we're seeing here from Hamas and how they are attacking innocent people in southern Israel. And I think that this parallel is very fitting. Okay, that's what Benjamin Netanyahu was talking about. Cori Bush, she takes it and she totally takes it out of context. And she describes, what Hamas did to Israel really on October 7th. In her tweet, Israel is targeting Hamas because they're terrorists. Okay, Hamas targets Israelis because they hate Jews. That's what ethnic cleansing is. It's what Hamas is doing because they're targeting Jewish people because they hate Jews. Hamas is being targeted because they are terrorists and they're terrorizing the Israelis. Okay, where are you at with the ethnic cleansing by Hamas on October 7th when all of this happened? For a lot of you progressives, the problem isn't that Hamas raped, murdered, and kidnapped Jews. It's that the Jews who weren't raped, murdered, and kidnapped have the cojones to try to stop it from happening again. That's what the progressives are all mad about because, it's not really the problem isn't that Hamas raped, murdered, and kidnapped Jews. No. It's that Jews who weren't raped, murdered, and kidnapped are trying to put an end to the terror and they're going after Hamas. So like I said, I talked with Darren LaHood at the Lincoln Reagan dinner on Friday, and he talked with me, and I said, like, why do we have to send humanitarian aid? Couldn't Israel just turn Gaza into glass overnight? And he goes, well, yeah, but if they go and do that, then their northern border is apparently left, open, and it would be, where Hamas would be able to come in through their northern border. I don't know. I don't see the briefings, but point is, we need to de-escalate. There needs to be some de-escalation going on here. I've got to take a quick break, but when we come back, driverless cars running over people. We're going to be talking a little bit about this driverless car. It's a cruise. It's called Cruise Taxis, and they're in California, and they're driverless. And this driverless taxi hit somebody and drug this person down the street. I'm going to tell you about it here coming up next on the Morning Buzz, Cities 92.9. Well, this is fun. Have you seen this movie? Did you go see this weekend? It's called Five Nights at Freddy's. Okay, so this is a movie that has just completely dominated the box office with a whopping $78 million domestic debut over Halloween weekend. Okay, so this is a huge movie, $78 million over just this past weekend here in the United States. It raised another 52 million outside of the United States, bringing it its total debut, its international debut to $130 million. So this is a huge movie. And I knew that it was going to be a huge movie. You want to know why? Because Five Nights at Freddy's, the creator of the video game the movie is actually based on has famously refused to bow to the mob. And I've seen this before. I mean, we saw it with Sound of Freedom. There is so many of you, and there is none of them. Okay, there are so many of like-minded people out there, like you and me. Scott Cawthon, he's the guy who created the video game that the movie is actually based on, Five Nights at Freddy. So he refused to bow to the mob and apologize for his donations to multiple conservative politicians, one of whom is actually former President Donald Trump. So in a Reddit post, he says, my response and maybe last post, he goes, yes, I supported President Donald Trump because I felt he was the best man to fuel a strong economy and stand up to America's enemies abroad, of which there are many. I'm a Republican, I'm a conservative, I'm a Christian, I'm pro-life, and I believe in God. This is what he says in his Reddit post. This guy who created the video game that the movie is actually based on, and I believe in equality and in science and in common sense, despite what some may say all of these things can go together. That's not an apology or a promise to change. It's the way it's always been. So he talks about how he almost got or how he's been canceled or they tried to cancel him and his video game that the movie is actually based on. And he goes, if I get canceled, then I get canceled. I don't do this for money anymore. I do it because I enjoy it. And if people think I'm doing it, doing more harm than good now, then maybe it's better that I get canceled and retired. I would accept that, and I've had a fulfilling career. Besides, most things that people can take from you are things that never had much value to begin with anyway. So this is pretty cool. He thought he was going to get canceled for this movie. I mean, he has faced cancellation in the past. This Five Nights at Freddy, it slays at the box office. $78 million here in the United States, $130 million globally. And look, folks, it's just true. I mean, he's a Christian conservative. And I think that the reason why it just slayed at the box office was because he's a Christian conservative and a Trump supporter. And I mean, people stay in tune with that kind of stuff. They look at Sound of Freedom. It crushed at the box office. I knew it was going to crush. I knew this movie was going to crush because the guy is a Christian conservative and he's a Trump supporter, and people like that. People just go to see the movie because of that. Now, we know that Mike Pence dropped out of the race. Florida Republicans demand Ron return to his gubernatorial job, his job of being governor, and they want him to end his 2024 run. Yeah, I'd love to see Ron DeSantis. I think he's going to be next here. He needs to complete his term as Florida governor. There's been a grassroots political organization. It's called the Florida Republican Assembly, and they issued a declaration calling for DeSantis to return to his role he was reelected to in November of 2022. The declaration, confirmed by the group on social media, suggested that DeSantis's presidential campaign has caused a distraction and that the interest of Florida's residents have been placed secondary to his White House bid. Ooh. Rhonda DeSantis, it's time to get out of the race. And Trump has specifically called for the wall. He's called for all kinds of things. And look, Ron DeSantis failed to support this bill. So Trump has specifically called for taxing remittances to Mexico many times to fund the wall. And there was even a bill for it in 2017. And Ron DeSantis actually failed to support that bill when he was in Congress. Okay, failed to support that bill when he was in Congress. Why does DeSantis lie so much? He hasn't been so tough on the border as Donald Trump has been. And I think it's time for him to get out of the race. When we come back, I'm going to tell you a little bit about CNN. They had some corporate journalismers on the ground there, and they interviewed this Maine resident. And they were hoping to push this gun control narrative by interviewing this Maine resident. That's what corporate journalismers do after a mass shooting. They get their journalismers down on the ground. They try to push this narrative out there. And this Maine resident actually pushes back on that narrative and says that he wishes he had a firearm to protect himself in this moment. And this was actually while they were looking for the guy. Anxious Maine communities, they have now begun to feel this sense of relief after they found the guy who was accused of killing these 18 people dead. They found him, he's dead. But at the time, the CNN journalismers were interviewing residents, and there was still a gunman on the loose. And I think it's an issue. I think it's an issue that, before the dust even settles, we've got corporate journalismers out there trying to scare people into peddling this gun control narrative. And it's a shame. We're going to talk a little bit about that and the driverless cars. How are they a problem? Because now I've got this story of a driverless car actually running over somebody and dragging this somebody around or down the street, actually. So I'm going to be back next. This is the Morning Buzz. Good morning, folks. Thanks so much for tuning in. We are going to be talking with Jerry Vogler from the McLean County VA. We've got Veterans Corner to hit today. Now, the Daily Mail, they've got the numbers out here on Nancy Pelosi's federal building. I think it's absolutely incredible. 150 overdoses on this same block that this building is on. It's called the Nancy Pelosi Federal Building. And, when the building went up, the designer said that this was going to be the way the government should be and how the workplace should be. That's what they said the building was going to represent. Instead, it's become a symbol of the way government doesn't work. Okay, and how these workplaces in this federal building are largely empty due to drug and crime problems, facilitated from these misguided policies from progressives. At a state level, at a city level in San Francisco. That's where the building is at. So 150 overdoses in the same block that this building is on in the first 6 months of 2023. We're going to talk about that coming up in just a little bit. But first, CNN corporate journalismers, they're out at it again. Jerry Vogler joining me next. It's a Monday morning, 70 degrees and sunny. Yes, it's kind of cold out there, and as you guys could probably hear over the microphone, I'm a little nasally today. I did not make it out to the Halloween party out at the VFW Post 454. Kev did. He went as Ken from Barbie, which is actually hilarious. But big shout out to Kev Ferris, who hosted, who was a celebrity judge for the VFW Post 454 Halloween costume contest. Big shout out to the members of the AKA band as well. They rock. They're pretty awesome. So before we get into, Veterans Corner, really quick, I wanted to tell you about the corporate journalismer CNN out there. We'll get into the story a little bit later, but CNN, they were on the ground looking for Maine residents that were scared enough to call for gun control. But they chose the wrong guy for their agenda, and he's perfect for Americans. He's from Maine, and he was interviewed by CNN after this guy went on a shooting rampage, killed like 18 people, injured dozens more. And it all started at this Walmart distribution center where Corey, the guy I'm going to be telling you guys about, who was interviewed by CNN, his daughter worked there. Thankfully, she's okay. Everybody's okay. The family is understandably very shaken, though. But I love it when CNN gets out there and they try to push this agenda, push this narrative, and they try to find these people on the ground to try to get them to say, oh, firearms are bad. Gun control is needed. This guy was not falling for it, and he actually said he wished he had a firearm. So we're going to be getting to that here shortly, but Jerry Vogler on the line for McLean County VA. He's with the McLean County VA. He's the superintendent. First things first, let's talk a little bit about this earplug settlement now in the books. It's a 3M earplug settlement. Can you tell me about this, Jerry Vogler?
Yeah, 3M has been under a lawsuit, I think since about 2015, over defective earplugs that a subsidiary of 3M had contracted with the federal government for literally hundreds of thousands of these earplugs over that 1999 to 2015 time period. What they found during the course of the discovery and so forth, as they go through the court case, was that 3M actually knew about it, that there was a problem, that during the course of physical activities, those earplugs might loosen, and in doing so would expose the person's hearing to loud noises and other type problems connected with what the earplug should fix. Because of that, and because of the financial burden that 3M company is under right now, and it's not just this lawsuit on the earplugs. They've got another number of problems that they're trying to deal with. The settlement was made probably, from what the news media says, for a little bit more than what the $6.01 billion settlement is. However, if they did that, it would be likely, if it was much more, that the 3M company would simply file for bankruptcy, which meant that the settlement would probably not be paid at all, or if so, a much diminished amount. So this $6.01 billion settlement, basically the way it's structured, will help ensure that 3M is financially able to make that settlement and pay the settlement out. The big thing is there's about 500,000 veterans who served during that 99 to 2015 time frame that have signed on to that lawsuit over the last 8 years. The VA, however, wants to stress that accepting the lawsuit payout, which they can either accept it or not accept it. If they don't accept it, they can sue separately. That settlement, if they take it, does not preclude filing a service-connected disability compensation claim for that hearing loss. However, it appears that only those veterans who signed the suit, which was instigated by the veterans of foreign wars, can claim a portion of that settlement. So those that didn't get off the dime and become a part of that suit may and more likely will not be covered by the settlement.
Interesting. All right. So, what's another topic that we're hitting here for Veterans Corner? Young men aged 18 have 30 days after their 18th birthday to register for selective service, i.e., the draft. So, let's talk about that.
Okay. Being a draftee myself, I have a lot of personal experience. We haven't had a draft since about 1974. However, it has been restricted strictly to 18-year-old males, requiring him. If that 18-year-old male does not file within 30 days, they could be losing any possibility of getting a Pell Grant or some type of other educational grant from the federal government for forever. They could also be liable for criminal charges, and probably equally important, they would never be able to work in a federally funded job. So it's a big deal. That was just the males. In the mid 90s, I guess, while Clinton was president, it was considered that females would now, at that time, be allowed to engage in the activities of all the military occupational specialties, not just the non-combat arms. However, because we weren't drafting anybody, nobody took the time to change the law that would include females at 18 also to have to register. However, with the current situation, with the transgendering and the woke community talking about discrimination in women's sports by transgendered men, it brings up a lot of issues. The biggest and the first one on the list is, what do you do about the requirement for a male at age 18 to register for the draft if they're transgendering to become a female? Are they exempt from that? And there could be lots of reasons why a person would become transgendered at that point if there was a draft. And with the big problems that we've got worldwide now, where we're not able to meet our military commitments and recruiting, that could be a big deal, because like during my time back in the 60s, people, of 18 would flee to Canada to avoid the draft. They were all forgiven by Jimmy Carter, by the way. However, the opposite is also true. Does a transgendering 18-year-old female that is transgendered to become male, is she required under the law as it's written today to file for the draft because she's claiming she's a male? That brings up all kinds of issues. And unfortunately, those issues have virtually nothing to do with the military readiness to fight our wars and defend our country. And my hope is that focusing on these issues does not distract from our need for a strong military and get lost in the social engineering type issues.
Yeah, I know. And with everything going on right now, Jerry, it's a little worrisome, I guess, that we're focusing so much on the social engineering issues, as you put it. So, one question I have here coming in for the Veterans Corner: I served in the military in 1960s And when I got out, I went to work for a company that paid my health insurance. Now that I'm retired, my former employer no longer pays as much for my healthcare insurance, and they do not pay for my hearing aids. I really need hearing aids. I live on Social Security and a modest retirement. Will the VA provide hearing aids for me? I'm not enrolled in VA healthcare.
The answer to that officially currently is absolutely not. And the reason is you can only get any kind of medical services through the VA if you are enrolled in VA healthcare or if you are experiencing a mental health, life-threatening type of incident. But then it's only good for that mental health incident, and you're not enrolled even at that point. However, it's pretty easy to enroll, and this person's inquiry sounds like they would probably be able to get a VA medical card. They simply fill out the Form 1010-EZ application for VA healthcare. They take a copy of their DD-214 and their last income taxes to prove they're not too high of income, and they contact the toll-free number, 1-800-320-8387, which is a hookup down in Danville. When it answers, they're to hit 0 rather than listen to the menu. It will go to a live operator and ask for eligibility at the VA Bloomington Clinic. And they'll set up an eligibility meeting with the veteran, sit down, and they'll probably be able to determine almost right away whether that veteran is eligible for VA health care. Once that happens, they will ask if the veteran wants to set up an appointment. And the answer to that should always be yes, because when they get the appointment, it's for a baseline medical evaluation. And they can ask at that time also to have a hearing test. And then the hearing aids can come from there.
Awesome. Yeah. So get enrolled. It's the moral of the story. Now, the quote of the day, I like this. It's any soldier worth a salt would be anti-war, and still there are things worth fighting for. Explain where this quote comes from, Jerry, and give me some of your commentary on the quote of the day for Veterans Corner here on Cities 92.9.
Well, it comes from General Norman Schwarzkopf. In case people forget, he was the general in charge in the Middle East during Desert Storm and Desert Shield, and had the what was it, 100-hour war or something like that when it took place to defeat Saddam Hussein's military and free Kuwait to be a free country again. Men and women who serve in the military are, in a lot of ways, just ordinary citizens. They're people that have jobs. They're people that have loved ones. They're people that are the kids of people who served or didn't serve. However, when they decide that they're going to go into the military, they're usually doing it for a number of reasons. But one and the primary reason is for the sake of the country. And they're able to do extraordinary things because of that one single facet, and that is for their country and what it stands for. And my belief is that that quote by Norman Schwarzkopf really talks about military. I never met a soldier that said, "Oh boy, I can't wait for the next war." It was more like, "I'm here to serve if we have a next war, and we should execute that war in the quickest, most humane way possible, not only for ourselves, but for our enemy."
Yeah, and I don't know, fueling both sides of the war. And I mean, we're fueling every conflict, both sides of every conflict that's currently going on right now. So
Yeah, we should always examine the reasons why we're going to war in order to justify the sacrifices that those who do serve and that we know that the members of the military will face on our behalf. If we don't do that and jump off the diving board before we look to see whether there's water in the pool, we're doing a total disservice to those who serve in the past, the present, and the future.
Well, thanks so much, Jerry Vogler, for joining me here on Veterans Corner. I so do appreciate it. Veterans Corner every Monday morning at about 8 o'clock. Jerry Vogler, he's the McLean County Superintendent for the VA here locally. And Jerry, you have a great rest of your Monday.
You too.
All right, folks, coming up next, CNN, the corporate journalismer, they got the wrong guy. because they tried to interview him so that way they wanted him to push this gun control narrative, but they got the wrong guy because the guy actually says and turns around and he goes, I wish I had a firearm. So he really stuck it to CNN. I'm back next talking a little bit about that. Good morning, folks. We're going to be back on Cities 92.9. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Good morning. This is the Morning Buzz. Thanks so much for tuning in. I so do appreciate it. Live in studio, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Rumble. You can see me. I can interact with you. I'm so grateful for you guys tuning in every morning, 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. If you want to share this podcast out with your normie friends, you can do so at cities99.com. Before we took the break, I was telling you guys a little bit about the Maine communities. So in Maine, this gunman, right, he killed 18 people. He was recently found dead. So these people in these communities, they're feeling a bit of relief this week because this guy has been at large. He's been on the run. CNN was actually on the ground looking for residents who were scared enough to call for gun control. Okay. And they chose the wrong guy to peddle their agenda, to peddle their narrative. This guy is perfect for Americans. And last week in Maine, a guy went on a shooting rampage. Okay, that's what happened, and 18 people died. And he injured dozens more. It all started at this Walmart distribution center, and Corey's daughter, Corey is the guy we're going to be talking about today. She's thankfully okay. She worked there at the Walmart distribution center where this all kind of started. She's okay. The family is understandably very rattled. But this CNN reporter wanted to know how scary it was to see all of these long guns being used and carried by cops while they searched the neighborhood for this gunman. And Corey stopped the reporter right there and he gave him the business. Let's take a listen here to a bit of the report. Here we go.
Car, and then where he is now is a mystery.
So, real quick, this is about the manhunt. So it's
And that's
important. It's important to note that this is while the guy is still at large. So they haven't found the guy yet. We do know that the guy was found dead. Here we go. Let's
why
take a
there's so
listen.
much concern around this area. Take a listen to my conversation with one of the residents here as he talked about his concerns.
It's just nerves are rattled right now. Keeping an eye on the woods because I know those woods down there, they go run right back here. And I got my daughter inside.
Your daughter, how old is your daughter?
She's 10 years old. And my oldest daughter, she works at the Walmart DC too. And I had to message her to find out if she's okay. And it's very unnerving right now.
Seeing those officers with those long guns walking through.
That actually made me feel better. Seeing the cops coming around here, that makes me feel a million times better. In the situation like this, I wish I had a firearm.
Boom. There you go. So he was asked by the CNN reporter, how do you feel about these cops with all of these guns being carried by these cops, these big guns? And he says, that makes me feel better. He goes, I wish I had a firearm. The only thing that really bugs me about this is that the corporate journalismers from CNN, they never wait for the dust to settle and before they start trying to scare people into these gun control narratives. And that's just what journalismers do. There's this little brief waiting period between hearing the gun go off and confirming the shooter's identity, making sure that that shooter's identity doesn't get in the way of the media narrative before the gun control demands start. Okay, there's this tiny little waiting period that these journalismers go through. And I think the worst time to start peddling this gun control narrative is when an entire town, mind you, is on lockdown while this gunman is out on the loose. The last thing on people's minds is more laws, more regulation, and more laws and regulation for the government not to enforce. That's the thing. So one thing many of these shooters have in common is that these words, it's fall through the cracks or was known to the feds, is something that's a common phrase that a lot of these shooters have in common. It's like they fell through the cracks or they were known by the feds. So we're going to take a quick break. I'm going to continue this story on the other side, and we're going to be visiting with a good friend of mine from the Livingston County VA. That's next. Woo! Hey, good morning. This is the Morning Buzz. You can text in at 309-451-9299. A text from Chad Burke. I love Chad. He was telling me a little bit about the Bloomington buyback yesterday. So the gun buyback. He says it was a total disaster. 2 miles of cars, and I got there at about 8:30. Left by 2:00. Wow. And had moved about 40 feet and still hadn't made progress towards the officers checking us in. So, wow, that's incredible. The gun buyback didn't go so well. There were a lot of people. He said there were like 2 miles of car. That's incredible. There was a lot of people there. I didn't think that many people would show up to something like a Bloomington police gun buyback, but they did. They showed up, and it took Chad some time to get through that line. So kind of interesting. We are going to be talking a little bit about Nancy Pelosi's building here coming up in just a little bit. There's calls for it to be shut down. It's a federal building. There's a senator from Iowa demanding that building be shut down because of all of the ravaging crime that's been going on that street block where the building is at. But first, before I get into any of that, my good friend here, Michael Hare. He is the McLean or the Livingston County. So earlier in the show today, we were talking with Jerry Vogler, who is the McLean County Superintendent for the VA. But in Livingston County, there's Michael Hare, and he's like the Jerry Vogler of Livingston County. So this is the VA Assistance Commission. He's joining me here because we've got to talk about something that's going on November 12th. So good morning, Mike. How are you?
Great. It's good to be here. Thank you for taking the time to allow me to reach out to our local residents, Kat.
Well, thank you for everything that you're doing as the VA superintendent in Livingston County, but also thank you for your service. Tell me a little bit before we get into anything that's going on November 12th, which is it's a luncheon. It's going to be great information, especially if you've served in the past, folks. I want to thank you for your service, Mike, but also tell me about your service and who you are.
Oh, yes, ma'am. So I was raised in Eastern Woodford County, went to Eureka, Congerville, Goodfield, graduated out, got down to ISU and found ROTC in 1983. Made it through the program, went on active duty from 1986 to 1990, came home, joined the Guard, was a traditional guardsman from 1991 until 1992, and then was offered full-time employment by the Illinois Guard, administering and supporting our infantry units here in central Illinois. Started out at the old infantry headquarters on South Main, down to Decatur to be part of the brigade team when it was down there, and then Joliet when we had responsibility for Kankakee, Pontiac, Bloomington, and let's see, where's the other one at? Up at the Joliet Armory. So we had roughly 500 to 600 infantry guardsmen. And then after 9/11, I took a position down in Springfield only to watch 9/11 happen. I was still assigned to the infantry brigade, and my unit was activated. We did security around our nuclear power plants here in central Illinois with state police for a short while after 9/11. And then in 2002, we were mobilized to go to Germany for a year to do the same thing, and came back, helped get our units ready for Iraq and Afghanistan, as a supervisor of the maintenance team down in Springfield that had responsibility for our downstate units. And then in 2007 was mobilized to go to Afghanistan to lead a small team of infantry advisors to help the Afghan army train and prepare themselves. And then in 2011, spent a year with our Polish counterparts doing the same thing. And so I had a great experience taking care of soldiers. Probably the most important thing I did in my career was to support the 3,000 families after I came back in 2008 as their families, their soldiers deployed to Afghanistan with our 33rd Brigade combat team. So really got to see how families sacrifice attending their family support meetings, accompanying families to visit wounded soldiers at our treatment centers and what was Walter Reed and now down at Brooks Army Medical Center. And then unfortunately, burying 18 of them. So I really have a passion for families and the sacrifices they make. So in 2022, I was selected to be the Veterans Assistance Commission Superintendent up in Livingston County. I've always enjoyed working out of the Delavan Armories, the Pontiac Armories. They're the old, what we call WPA armories that were built by Delano Roosevelt. They're all the same style. And those armories in those small communities are just awesome facilities. And so really have a great appreciation for all Livingston County does. When we brought our soldiers back in 2009 and 10, we did 16 welcome home ceremonies out of that Pontiac Armory. And every time our Vietnam veterans, our Korean veterans, they came back to make sure that those groups of 16, 32, 48 soldiers were welcome home in a magnificent manner.
Aw.
And now in this role, I get to give back to my Vietnam veterans that are there in Pontiac because one of the big things our commission does is we provide rides to veterans that are enrolled in the VA healthcare system to either the Hines facility up outside of Chicago, over to Peoria or to Bloomington, Joliet, Kankakee, LaSalle, for those veterans that are enrolled with us to get them a safe ride to take advantage of their VA healthcare. So heard you and Jerry talking about that. And for those Vietnam veterans that are still a little gun shy, what I will say is the VA is really changed, really adding resources. It's not perfect by any means, but it works a lot better when you use it. And I will say for the last 15 years that I've been using the VA healthcare, originally in Peoria and now in Bloomington, is I've had like 3 primary cares, and I know there's no place in Central Illinois with Advocate Carl or OSF that you can see the same primary care team probably for more than 2-3 years. And so it's really special that the VA is able to attract and keep talent. So.
Yeah, well, and I'm so glad that you've joined me in the studio to talk a little bit about this special event. There's a key speaker. Her name is Major Jennifer Farley. Tell me about her and tell me about how this luncheon on November 12th is supposed to reach more female veterans and why you would want to reach female veterans.
Absolutely. So females make up approximately 20% of our veterans population, but unfortunately less than 10% use the VA facilities. So we have we're blessed in my office to have Natasha Furlano, who's a Navy veteran and spent 6 years on the Abraham Lincoln floating around the Middle East while I was on the ground in Afghanistan. So she's got that passion. Major Farley is a medical service officer assigned to Special Operations Command out at Fort Liberty, and had served as a cultural engagement team lead in Afghanistan. And so having served in a similar role, when you're in a small team, you're building relationships across many different coalitions with building trust with your Afghan counterparts, building trust with the folks that are coming and going and supporting you, and all the while trying to help the country that you're working in improve themselves and be that demonstration of on the ground democracy in places that not a lot of people want to go. So.
Well, November 12th
yes,
is when we can go see Jennifer Farley, Major Farley.
Yes, it'll be at the Elks Lodge in Pontiac, 459 Elks Lodge Drive. Its doors will open about 12 o'clock, and we'll get lunch started about 12:30 with an opening ceremony. And then after that, we'll let our elected officials, our representatives from the VA, IDVA, the 11th Judicial Circuit Veterans Treatment Court, introduce themselves and what they do for veterans. And then we'll hear from Major Farley and let her explain how females are serving our country in so many different ways. I will say I was lucky enough to serve under one of the first female West Point graduates back in 1984. She was a company commander to me, and I learned as much from her as I'd learned from any other commander I'd served for. She was fair, she was firm, and she was effective. And had it not been for that experience in the Army, I might be a different person. I think that females and males can do well in the military, and especially saw that in the Polish military, where they have female combat arms officers before we did here in the Illinois National or in the U.S. Army, and probably our most ferocious, most effective lieutenant was a female intelligence officer from the Polish Army. So seeing it for yourself makes you a believer.
Yeah. Well, and what can over 2,000, what is it, 2,000 veterans within Livingston County, what are they going to get out of this luncheon?
So they're going to get a lot of information. Our goal is to let them know what resources are out there. You know, of those 2,000 veterans, I'd say come join us, because only about 700 are using VA services.
Wow.
And so our goal is to move that number up. Even a lot of folks, a lot of veterans will say, well, I'm fine. Well, maybe you are, maybe you're not. But you should be using the VA, because there are a lot of planning factors that go into it. So the number of folks enrolled drive the amount of resources that flow back to Central Illinois to the VA to be able to support our veterans. So if you're a veteran and you served in the Middle East over the last 15 years, the VA is still trying to reach out to you. If you've not had your screening for burn pits and exposures, even though that PACT Act 1-year enrollment period has expired, if you've been boots on the ground in the air or in the waters in the Middle East, the VA is looking to see you so that they can put a name to the face, do a quick exam, and if you're entitled or should be applying for benefits, they'll refer them back to either myself or the other VSOs here in Central Illinois to apply for the benefits that you've earned, your family earns, because watching what's happening with our Vietnam veterans and the Agent Orange exposures really is heartbreaking. And seeing folks that should have been receiving benefits, applying for benefits after they've had cancers, after they've had heart disease, is a heartbreaking thing to do. And your family deserves better. The country wants to help you, but you got to be humble enough to take care of yourself, take care of your family, and then take care of your buddies that could use those resources back here in Central Illinois.
Well, thank you so much,
Yes,
Mike
ma'am.
Hare, for coming on to the program. And folks, we are going to be posting that flyer for November 12th, that luncheon. You won't want to miss it, especially if you're looking, and if you're not enrolled in VA services, you need to take advantage of these resources. Mike Hare.
Yes. One last thing, please RSVP by 1 November or the Friday this week, so that we can make sure we have enough meals. We're planning about 225, but we'll hold 350 in that venue. So as many as you can come out, at least come get the information.
Wonderful. Well, thanks so much, folks. We're going to be back on the other side. This is the Morning Buzz, Cities 92.9. Good morning, folks. Thanks so much for tuning in. I so do appreciate it. We're going to be back talking a little bit about CNN, the corporate journalismers. Plus, I do want to talk about the senator from Iowa demanding that this building named after Nancy Pelosi be shut down, actually, because this building has actually turned into a ravaged cesspool of crime, this building itself. So we're going to be talking about that here coming up in just about 30 seconds. If you're watching, go ahead, smash the like button. Bob, yes, the Bloomington VA is great, great staff. Yes, so we talked with Mike Hare quite a bit here in the 8 o'clock hour about the veterans assistance that you can get if you are a veteran. November 12th is a luncheon. There's going to be a key speaker. That's Major Jennifer Farley. You can see her speak. So go ahead, smash the like button if you're watching, and we're going to be back in just a couple of minutes, just a couple of seconds. Woo! Good morning. Hey, this is the Morning Buzz. I just watched this video of Gavin Newsom, and man, that's kind of disturbing. Gavin Newsom, are you running for president? Just come out and say you're running for president, dude. Gavin Newsom, he ran over this small little Chinese kid while playing basketball in China. Why is Gavin Newsom in China in the first place? But he completely plows over this little Chinese kid while he's playing basketball, and it's just hilarious to watch this guy play like, what are you doing? Are you running for president? What are you doing in China? We're here live in studio, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Rumble. Senator from Iowa, she's demanding that we shut down this building named after Nancy Pelosi. So what is this building? It's a federal building that HHS workers go to work. It's the Department of Health and Human Services. It's in San Francisco. Nancy Pelosi has represented San Francisco for 35 years. So in 2007, she was elected speaker, and until very recently, she no longer holds that role. In fact, she even had her office still as Speaker of the House because Kevin McCarthy was a weakling and gave her her office and let her keep her office there as Speaker of the House. But anyway, so she has completely allowed San Francisco to succumb to progressive ruins. And this Joni Ernst, she's a Republican from Iowa. She's calling for this federal building to be shut down because why should taxpayers keep the lights on in this federal building, this Nancy Pelosi haunted house? So this federal building is just riddled with crime. There was actually 150 overdoses in this same block that the building is on, this block. And there were 150 overdoses just in the first 6 months of 2023. And the employees, the federal employees, they go to the building to work, and they're actually chased by homeless people with hammers and knives on their way into the building. So when this building was first made, and it's named after Nancy Pelosi because, you know, like all good politicians, she's in it for her legacy. She's in it to build up her legacy. And of course, she has to have a building named after her. But this was supposed to be a symbol of government and how the workplace should be, the way government should be and the way the workplace should be. That's what the designer said when the building went up. Ironically, the Nancy Pelosi federal building is instead a symbol of the way government doesn't work. And the offices, the workplaces, they're all empty because there's crime problems, and the drug and crime problems is because of the misguided policies of the state and the city governments there in San Francisco. So there you have it, folks. Nancy Pelosi's haunted house. And we need to shut it down. We need to shut it down. She keeps turning a blind eye to the carnage of her own district, despite being one of the most powerful people in this country. She doesn't give a darn about her constituents. You guys have a great rest of your day. We're going to be back tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. It's been a blast. Up next after me, it's Glenn Beck, then Dan Bongino, Sean Hannity, Mark Levin, Mark Lee Van Camp, and Robbins. I love you so much. We'll be back at it tomorrow morning on Tuesday. This has been the Morning Buzz with Kat Peterson.